On October 16th, 2021, at about 12 o'clock in the afternoon, 9-year-old Sonia Zhavoronkova from Vologda went out for a walk with her friend Alla. For the girls, it should have been the most usual walk. However, neither in the evening of that day nor the next day, Sonia, unlike her friend, never returned home. This is the Defunct City channel. Subscribe to our channel and don't forget to click on the bell so as not to miss new episodes and stay up to date. In just a few days, the events that took place in Vologda stirred up all of Russia. But first things first. As the public later learned, Sonia Zhavoronkova and her family lived in a rented apartment in Vologda. Her family was considered disadvantaged. The girl's relatives suffer from alcoholism, and her mother, among other things, according to those around her, was engaged in providing intimate services for money. And that money was very rarely spent on the child's needs. Therefore, Sonia's classmates often gave her their old clothes, and the girl's textbooks were bought at the expense of the schoolchildren's parents. Sonia's older brother was repeatedly seen in cafes and stores begging for food. The girl herself could occasionally treat herself to cheap ice cream or a few candies. At the same time, in spite of growing up in a terrible atmosphere of indifference and cruelty, those around her spoke of Sonia as a kind and very sociable girl. As much time as possible she tried to spend outside the family, on the street. So on that fateful day of October 16th, the schoolgirl once again left home to go for a walk with a friend, having previously taken a backpack full of things. But this time she never returned. Her mother filed a missing daughter report only 24 hours later. According to witnesses, the woman was intoxicated the whole time. The police and volunteers immediately came looking for the child. In different locals combed through neighborhoods, wooded areas, industrial zones. Employees of the utilities checked wells, septic tanks, basements, and attics. At the same time, investigators interviewed Sonia's relatives, teachers, and friends. All of this quickly yielded results, and soon the picture of that day began to become clearer. The investigators obtained video surveillance of the afternoon of October 16th that had recorded Sonia and her friend Alla in a mall near the Gontrana stop. It was seen that the girls were buying candy. A suspicious woman, presumably of Roma appearance, was near them the entire time. It was in her company that the girls later left the store, after which their trail was cut short. However, investigators already knew that Alla's friend, had returned home that same Saturday without telling anyone what had happened. So something happened after the girls broke up. From the moment Sonia's mother filed a missing persons report, the investigators and psychologists tried to get Alla to talk. However, she told her story only to her mother. And only on October 19, a local TV channel broadcast a short interview with the woman, where she shared the gruesome details of that very day, told by her daughter. According to Alla, while walking, Sonia had the idea to hand out flyers to people. She made them herself on sheets of notebook paper. Each urged people not to throw garbage in the street, not to pollute the planet, and to protect nature. So the girls, offering the leaflets to passers-by, walked down Vorovsky Street towards the railroad tracks. In Leningradskaya Street, in the yard of the house number 40, a friend met a woman who was smiling and friendly. As Alla later recounted, she praised them for their caring attitude toward the environment and offered to buy them something tasty. First, the stranger took them to a nearby cafe. The girls tried the carrot cake, but did not like it. Then the woman called them to another cafe where she said there were very tasty cakes. Eventually, they walked through the same store where the camera recorded them and later came together to the woman's home. Alla told her mother that the woman kept looking at Sonia and told her she looked very much like her daughter. The stranger kept asking the children very strange questions, like, "What will you do when you die? How will you feel? And how will your mother feel?" Alla was frightened by such talk, and she tried to talk Sonia into going home, but she would not agree. At the same time, her friend had a chance to escape. Twice the woman sent Alla to the store frozen and butter. But each time the girl obediently came back. The last time the stranger met her already at the entrance. She yelled, said that Sonia would not come down, and advised Alla to go home. And she listened. When asked why the girl did not immediately tell about what happened, her mother confessed.
We had repeatedly talked to her about not going out with strangers, neither with women, nor with men, nor with children. And in spite of all my warnings, stories that anything could happen, including something terrible, she still went and was apparently afraid that I would scold her.
Now the girl is staying with her grandmother. The parents want to protect the child from unnecessary questions and negative information. Thus, Alla's story helped determine the possible location of her friend, and on October 18, at 21 hours and 50 minutes, the task force, together with the Ministry of Emergency Situations, were already opening the door of the 8th house on Dolgoy Alley. Everyone hoped the last to see Sonia Zhavoronkova alive and unharmed. But what awaited them behind the door shocked even the specialists. Breathless Sonia lay in a room with multiple stab wounds. Her body was disfigured. Later, forensic experts admitted that it took them a considerable amount of time to restore her appearance. The main suspect in the brutal massacre immediately became the landlady of the apartment, 40-year-old Uliana Lanskaya. As it turned out, it was her who was seen in the company of the girls in the surveillance footage. The woman was not in the house, and the authorities immediately began searching for the alleged perpetrator on hot pursuit. At the same time, residents of Vologda began to share stories in social networks and the media about what Lanskaya is. So it became known that the woman previously received a teacher's education at the local university, becoming a teacher of English and German languages. Well-read, calm, balanced, and so spoke her friends before the woman discovered some problems. But more about that later. At first she worked as a tutor, then left for Italy, and after working as a nurse there she even saved up for a new apartment. Back in Vologda, Uliana, who was then still, by the way, called Maria Kisleva, got a job in a shoe store as a salesperson. 10 years ago, the woman changed her name to more, as she said, Resident Uliana Lansky. Colleagues jokingly called her Masha the Italian. At some point, according to acquaintances, the woman began to say strange things. For example, during her second pregnancy, she communicated with an alien contact. After her daughter was born, she assured people around her that she had cancer. She asked doctors to operate on her daughter. Naturally, they refused. Lanskaya's daughter was perfectly healthy. Then, according to some unconfirmed information, the woman tried to give the girl some medicine to make her disabled. Lanskaya's parents quickly noticed that she was being aggressive with her children and filed for deprivation of parental rights. As a result, the woman's little daughter and 18-year-old son are now living with relatives. When the custody officers took the children away from the mother, she threatened to go out the window of the apartment with the little girl. After Lanskaya tried to get her daughter and son back through the court, but fortunately, she was rejected. The woman showed cruelty towards her mother as well. A little over 2 years ago, Lanskaya struck her, for which she received a fine of 5,000 rubles. Since 2019 year, the woman is registered in the psychoneurological dispensary with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. According to neighbors, a couple of weeks before the incident with Sonia Zhavoronkova, Lanskaya had just returned home from the psychoneurological dispensary. She lived alone in her apartment on Dolgoy Lane. During those days, the woman was seen more than once near other people's children in the park and in the yard. She kept a close eye on the kids and sometimes talked to them. They say that Lanskaya was constantly buying large quantities of candy at a nearby store. Parents sensed danger in her behavior and strictly forbade their children to communicate with her, much less visit. They repeatedly complained to the police about her, but since there were no formal violations on the part of the woman, the authorities did not do anything. In the end, It got so bad that one day Lanskaya tried to take the twins out of the daycare center, pretending to be their relative. Fortunately, vigilant educators immediately called the mother of the girls and found that she had not sent anyone to kindergarten. The call frightened Lanskaya, and she quickly left the facility.
And on Tuesday morning I get a call from the teachers themselves, saying, "Elena Viktorovna, some woman came, introduced herself as your relative, and said Mama knows. I came to pick up my children. She didn't know the last name, she didn't know the children's names. She knew by age. She told me the twins were 5 and 6 years old." Immediately, the educator called me to clarify this woman. She got scared, turned around and went behind the fence. I immediately realized that this was the woman who was walking in the park on the weekend approached me, and I went to the police to write a report.
Shortly before that, the mother of the twins had already seen Yuliana with her children. After the incident in the kindergarten, the woman filed a report to the police, but for some reason it was not accepted. And then, on that ill-fated Saturday, Lanskaya finally managed to gain the trust of 9-year-old girls. Alla literally, by some miracle, escaped a sad fate. And that's what experienced that day, and Sonia terrible to imagine. The forensic specialists concluded that she was deprived of her life in a long and brutal way for almost 5 hours. The suspect was detained quickly. By that time, she was almost 800 kilometers from the scene of the crime in the Karelian town of Belomorsk. It was reported that she was taken off the street Petersburg-Murmansk train, but later it was reported that Lanskaya was found in one of Belogorsk hospitals with a diagnosis of overdose on unspecified medications. As it turned out, the woman was trying to end her life. She was delivered to hospital in an unconscious state and identified on the spot. In the bag of the suspect, the drug hydroxychloroquine, which is prescribed for schizophrenia, was found. About 10 packs of anti-tumor pills, Russian and foreign passports, and a small knife were found in her bag. It was not possible to question her immediately. Lanskaya was in an insane state, so it was decided to transport the woman from Karelia to Vologda and place her in a temporary detention facility for further investigation. And soon after coming to her senses, Yuliana Lanskaya gave a confession. She admitted that she really took the life of 9-year-old Sonia. Here are her words. "My whole family was dying of cancer. I realized I didn't want to die alone." Whether any of her relatives really suffered from cancer is unknown. The second motive she attributed to the fact that she allegedly wanted to leave a mark on history. Lanskaya later admitted that Sonia simply suddenly caused her dislike. Yuliana Lanskaya was assigned a forensic psychiatric examination, which resulted in the release of the perpetrator from criminal liability. Instead of a real term of imprisonment behind bars, she will undergo inpatient treatment in a specialized medical institution under the close supervision of doctors. On October 21, after the court session, Lanskaya, as if forgetting about all her confessions and earlier testimony, began to convince journalists that she was not to blame for the girl's death. Here is what she was saying.
"I rented the apartment to 2 men who lived there before me, so we don't know who it was at all, because there were 2 other men standing upstairs. There were several other men who had rented the apartment from me, alcoholics."
According to her, Lanskaya urgently went to Karelia only because of a blood transfusion due to cancer. According to Yuliana's new version, she allegedly had no purpose to meet the girls. They themselves came up to her and gave her a flyer. Lanskaya invited them to drink tea at her home, and allegedly nothing happened after that. One girl left, the other stayed at her apartment, and then the woman herself left. She does not know what happened next. It is reported that Sonia Zhavoronkova was picked up from the morgue by her uncle. Some say he was very drunk. The girl's funeral took place on October 21 in the cathedral, after which she was buried in the Kazatsinsky cemetery at the expense of the senior staff of the Vologda administration. The day before, on October 20, Vologda residents observed a minute of silence in memory of the victim. They gathered at 8 p.m. near the same house. Here, people who cared arranged a spontaneous memorial with toys, flowers, and candles. This terrible tragedy was the reason for 2 more criminal cases. Thus, under Article 293 of the Criminal Code, negligence will be considered violations in the work of the prevention system, which did not identify in time the dangerous situation of Sonia and the family. With regard to the mother of the deceased, Anna Zhavoronkova, a criminal case was initiated under Article 125 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation for abandonment in danger. Sonia's older brother, who, according to Vologda residents, had already begun to lead an asocial lifestyle, had already been removed from the family. Most likely his mother would be deprived of parental rights. Sonia Zhavoronkova's story again illustrates a great number of problems in Russian society. Things could have turned out differently if child welfare officials had not turned a blind eye to the horrible atmosphere in which the 9-year-old girl was growing up. For candy and cake, ready to go anywhere and with anyone. Or if the social environment had not driven Sonia's mother into alcohol addiction, if psychoneurological dispensaries and other psychiatric institutions had enough staff and funds to maintain and keep potentially dangerous patients out. And finally, if some ordinary passerby or mall shopper had not been afraid to approach the girls and ask if they were okay, and if they knew this woman, whose behavior clearly prompted such questions. But that didn't happen, and once again, we have what we have. Perhaps this tragedy will change someone's perspective on our reality. But how many more children will we lose before there is a real change? Take care of yourself and your loved ones.